Say what? The street people were considered bad people and you can't bring them to a holy place? Are you kidding me? And people wonder why so many of us despise these so-called holier than thou religious bigots. It has been said that whether you can or you can't, you're right. God is no respecter of persons. No matter our race, gender, nationality, social class, religion, or lack thereof, we all have equal access to whatever we define as success. Indeed, there is spiritual law that says that success is not discriminatory and that accomplishment is not biased. This law has been objectively proven over and over and over again throughout both ancient and modern history. Yet, there are still some people who just don't get it. There are still people to this day who believe that because of the color of their skin, they're doomed to failure, or because they've been born in a certain part of the world, that they have to go around begging others for money rather than doing something for themselves. Well, as if I have not given you enough examples on this channel already of individuals who've had all sorts of odds stacked against them and yet have succeeded, I want to give you another example today. An example of how, despite who you are or where you're from, extraordinary accomplishment is fully within your power. But this story is interestingly different because it involves more than just overcoming the odds. It's also about how when we genuinely want to serve others, every conceivable force in the universe will come to our aid and give us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. After you see this and hear this story, I want you to please be sure to share this video with as many people as possible, because trust me, you're going to want to bless them just as I am now about to bless you. Without further ado, I now present to you the incredible true story of Mully. The Kenyan slums are home to over 100,000 orphans. 1 out of 5 will not live to see their 5th birthday. Mully was the eldest of 3 boys. He and his brothers, along with their mother and father, lived in a small hut. His father was an alcoholic and didn't have a job. He would come home every day drunk and beat on their mother. She would scream for help, but no one ever came. This was Mully's life when he was a young boy. One morning, when he woke up, Mully found himself alone. The door was wide open, but he couldn't see or hear anyone outside. He looked everywhere but saw nothing. Everyone was gone. Mully had just been abandoned. With no one to look after him, Mully became a beggar. With hunger and thirst, he would wander around the village asking others to help him. Some days they did, others they didn't. Over time, he became cold toward life. He grew full of hatred for having been dealt this unfortunate hand, and often would ask why he had even been born. He hated his life, and on several occasions contemplated suicide because he didn't see any meaning in life. One day, however, he encountered a young man that saw his desperate situation. This young man introduced Mully to prayer, and on that day he could remember being told that with faith, nothing is impossible before God. For the first time, Mully could feel hope inside his heart. He became determined in that very moment that he would create a new life for himself. The very next morning, he began walking toward the city, Nairobi. He didn't have any money, not even a single cent in his pocket. It took him 3.5 days to reach the city. He never finished school, and so upon arriving to the city, he didn't know what kind of job he would be able to work. As he would roam around the streets and the busiest sections of the city, the people would just stare at him, saying that he needed to find a job, that they couldn't help him with any money. So, Mully, being determined, decides to go around and start knocking on doors, hoping that someone would give him a chance. And a chance is exactly what he got. Ask and you shall receive. A lady gave Mully a job cleaning her house. It turns out that this Indian woman was the wife of the CEO of a very big farming company in Kenya. Following 6 months of housekeeping duties, Mully was promoted to manager of the farm, now overseeing some 800 workers. From here, he was able to begin saving some money. Eventually, he had enough money saved to start his own taxi company. Full of smiles and charisma, Mully's taxi company became wildly popular. He started out with just one car that he would drive himself. His trademark became Mullyways. Eventually, just like anything else, his business grew. He purchased more taxis and soon was able to hire enough people to begin driving for him. In 1987, he officially founded Mullyways Agencies Limited, which not only included his taxi cab company, but also a tire company, a welding company, and an auto parts shop. From there, he opened his own insurance company, and from there, he moved on to real estate. Yes, Mully had become wildly successful, having been abandoned as a child and growing up on the streets. Ultimately, he became the sole oil and gas supplier in all of Western Kenya. One day, as he was getting out of his car, Mully was met by a group of street boys that asked him for money. He refused. When he came back to get into his car, it was gone. Immediately, he felt guilty. Here he was, a millionaire that once upon a time had been on the street himself, and yet he turned a group of boys away that were in need, the same way he had once been in need. This event would cause Mully to make a very drastic change in his life. That night during dinner, Mully made an announcement to his family that they would never forget. He told his family that he would never do business again, that he would never again work for money. Instead, he would sell all of his businesses and take the proceeds and begin giving back to the poor, to the abandoned street kids. One by one, he began rounding up children who had been abandoned on the street, and he brought them to his home. It started out as 2 to 3, then 10 to 20, then hundreds of kids Mully would bring home. Eventually, he had to expand his compound in order to accommodate everyone. However, the expansion project was conducted by the kids. He taught them how to make concrete for the stones and all types of manual work. You see, not only was Mully giving these kids a warm place to lay their heads at night, but he was also giving them a sense of purpose. Some of the children that Mully took in had been trained as prostitutes to survive. Mully would bring these kids and prostitutes to church. And would you believe that the religious hypocrites didn't like it and forced Mully out of the church?
The street children were considered as bad people. You can't bring them to a holy place.
Say what? The street people were considered bad people, and you can't bring them to a holy place? Are you kidding me? And people wonder why so many of us despise these so-called holier-than-thou religious bigots.
I was a young boy in the Sunday school classes. I still remember to this day how sad that looked. And one of the elders asked them to go out because those are bad people and we are good people.
With hundreds of mouths to feed, the Mully family was beginning to run out of money and food. When Mrs. Mully came to her husband saying that they were running out of food, his response was,
And then I said, why are you asking me about where we are going to get food? Don't you remember that I said, you ask God, pray.
And from nowhere, we heard the bell in the gate ringing, and someone went to check, and there was a lady we did not know. And she came with a truck full of food.
I was speechless. But this lady said, "Here, this is for you. A donation for the first time."
Akatuletea chakula, akatuletea pesa, alikuwa na shilingi 5,000 kwa bahasha. Na hiyo chakula ikatubeba kwa muda mrefu sana.
Soon, without enough space to remain on the compound inside of the city, Mully and the children were forced to relocate to the desert, where Mr. and Mrs. Mully had secured acres of land for their retirement one day. When they first moved out there, Kenya was going through a drought, which made things extraordinarily difficult for the children. Mully would have to drive 4 hours to the city every day just to secure clean water. But he had a plan. Using the vision God had given him and the hundreds of hands he had from the children, he was on a mission to convert this tract of desert into plush, green forestry, where the trees would create a mini climate, where rain would fall daily. For Mully, it was absolutely essential that he and the children become self-sustaining.
And Dad was thinking on how to be self-sustaining. And that's where the farming part really took a different turn.
The idea of us being able to be self-reliant was a very paramount aspect of how my father was viewing the entire project.
You know, people in Africa, in Kenya, they owe even the government, they depend on donation from the Western world. And then I always feel like, what can we do as Africans to change that attitude? Because I used to beg, you know. A beggar has got no choice. That's something I hated. And for that reason, I said I will never beg.
Incredibly, they created a massive hydroponic system where rainwater is collected atop of their greenhouses and then is rerouted for various purposes, such as the creation of a reservoir where they had begun fish farming. They also used the water to irrigate the 1.5 billion with the B trees they've planted since 2004.
Since 2004, we've planted over 1.5 billion trees in this property alone.
The water goes up and forms the clouds, and from forming the clouds, we have rainfall. With trees being planted annually, we have been able to create a microclimate, and therefore we have more regular rainfall.
This is real. When I bought this piece of land, there was nothing. There was no trees, there was nothing, no water. And through planting trees and through water conservation, I've seen that really working. One big dream that I have is to transfer the knowledge to the young generation so that we change Africa, we change our country, Kenya.
Mully's Children Family, also known as MCF, has grown to include a top-rated karate school, academic school, and several other training academies that teach the children valuable trade skills. Many of the children have gone off to college to accomplish great things in their own right. MCF has expanded to 5 locations in Kenya, where they continue to provide medical care, education, food, and clean water to thousands daily. This story shows that when God has called you to do something, He will absolutely make a way to sustain you in doing it. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, and it certainly doesn't matter the extent of your education. Remember, whether you say you can or you can't, you're right. Until next time, my name is Javon Harris of Seek, and I pray that our great God and Savior blesses you and keeps you in all that you do for His glory. I love you. Peace.